What's good, Ed Brew, baby? What is up, YouTube? It's Roy Millsy, back with Hometown Commander, and we are back for another episode of Millsy Brews, the show where we brew a deck for you on our quest to outbrew your favorite Magic channel. That intro is a little bit different this time because this actually isn't my list. This is Andrew. Andrew's back bringing out his lists and getting featured on the channel. I moved into the March of the Machines, the Aftermath. We had just one March of the Machines deck left, so he wanted to make sure we got covered. So I was like, hey, why not? March of the Machines is still a very recent set, and of course there's a bunch of commanders we still haven't gotten to from March of the Machines, so they've earned their way into the list to get brewed later. But Andrew picked a choice of a commander today that I think it fits him really well. This is an idea of a deck that I think he would enjoy really well. It's this commander that has a defined strategy but isn't super broken, isn't Terra OP or streamlined. But I like Quintorius because I think it has you work for it, but if you work for it well, I think you get a lot of value. We're talking about Quintorius, Loremaster, 3 red and a white for 3/5, Elephant Cleric, Vigilance. At the beginning of your end step, exile target non-creature, non-land card from your graveyard, create a 3/2 white and spirit creature token. And then for 1 red white, we can tap, sacrifice a spirit, choose target card exiled with Quintorius. You may cast that card without paying its mana cost. The spell we put into the graveyard, put it on the bottom of its owner's library instead. Okay, so Quintorius has this interesting play pattern where we're going to go ahead, we're going to try to get things into our graveyard. Then in our end step, we're going to exile something we want to cast later, make that spirit, and then we sacrifice a spirit, which could be the spirit we made or a spirit we make with other effects, and we get to cast that card. And then if that spell would get countered, it goes back to our bottom of our library instead. Otherwise, or if it just gets resolved, it goes back to the bottom, or if it's a permanent, it's going to go on to the battlefield. This is really cool because I think Quintorius is doing something new, but Quintorius is referencing a lot of the old Lorehold cards that we just saw in our last time at Strixhaven. So Andrew's done a really good job at trying to take some real advantage of a couple different types of cards, and we'll see that as we go through the deck. If you're not interested in hearing me go card by card, if you want to just see the deck list, it's going to be down in the description. Otherwise, just like every episode of Millsy Brews, we're going to go through the whole deck. We're going to talk about the cards, talk about the sub-strategies there, and help you kind of understand the list that's in front of us. I understand that everyone wants to hear that, and if you don't, the link is there for you. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Otherwise, let's crack in. 34 lands. I see Andrew's starting to channel me a little bit with his land count. I love it. I always get yelled at for playing 34 lands instead of 38, but I've never had an issue in a deck like this. We probably have enough card draw and mana artifacts to make it work. We see a good mix of basic lands and dual lands, playing enough of the fun dual lands to make it worth it, but playing some more recent dual lands, like we just saw a reprint of Battlefield Forge here. So recently we see Sundown Pass and Spectator Sea will make it. These are two of my favorite dual lands of all time. These two cycles are really good. And of course we get Boros Garrison in there. I will say, Andrew, note the lack of Lorehold Campus makes me, no, I'm just kidding. Lorehold Campus is not a land I would play in here, but I just feel like it fits that Quintorius theme considering how much Lorehold stuff we have. Ridiculous. We are playing the Fury Calm Snarl though, so you do get some points there. Going up in the enchantments, I like this. This is a good mix of what we'd want to see from the deck. Annoying Procession, double up on those spirits that we can make. City on Fire seems like a killer target for this ability. Get it into the graveyard, exile it, bring it back, and now all of our sources that would deal damage to a permanent player are dealing triple that damage instead. This is going to take all of our spirit tokens, all of our creature tokens, all of the things we're using, and turn that damage into harder to deal with for our opponent. We're also dealing with some spells and things like that that deal damage. We then literally look down the line to Passion Archaeologist, which is going to deal damage to our opponents based on what we're casting from this exile effect for free. So I like it. This is getting us down the road of trying to just really nail in on our strategy and make it work. Court of Grace seems great. When we don't have the Monarch, it's going to make us those spirits, which you can sacrifice for Quintorius' effect. But if we are the Monarch, it's going to give us 4/4 Angels. Those are pretty great in combat. Haunted Library is a fun card. I wish this card saw more play outside of just these spirit decks, but it says whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, you may pay 1. If you do, you get a spirit. Okay, well, this is perfect. Load up on those spirits. We can either use them for Quintorius' ability, right, or get into combat, attack our opponents with them. I like this kind of use of making tokens in a strategy that isn't completely defined by making tokens. Lorehold Excavation, red white, beginning of your end step, mill a card. If a land card was milled this way, you gain a life. Otherwise, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. Okay, well this is gray white. This could potentially put something really good in our graveyard for Quintorius. And then 5 exile a creature card, make a tap 3/2 white spirit creature token. So we have a ton of extra mana, and we have a few spare creature cards in our graveyard we don't need. We can make a spirit. I like this. Oath of Gideon, since we're playing a lot of Planeswalkers. Actually, one of Andrew's goals for this deck was to get some Planeswalkers in this deck. Oath of Gideon feels right, having them come in with loyalty ability, extra loyalty counter on, and I like that you get 2 tokens when this comes in, so this actually kind of pays for itself. Smothering Tithe feels like it's near perfect for any white deck these days. We can talk what we want to about staples and whether they exist in the format or not, or whether they're always needed in the format or not, but a deck like this would really get a lot of benefit out of Smothering Tithe, especially if you can get it down and get it working, because you get that extra mana and you really start to tax your opponents just that little bit. And then Restoration of Aganjo, getting a Plains into your hand, discarding and returning a permanent with mana value 2 or less, and then flipping it over to the back where the Restoration makes spirit tokens. So again, that makes a ton of sense, making spirits that we can use for Quintorius' ability. Getting to the artifacts, we see a lot of really great mana artifacts. The Arcane Signet, Boros Signet, Soul Ring, and then the Talisman. I love the Talismans. I'm happy that so many of them have gotten reprints, that some of them are a little bit more playable now. We see Battle Mage's Bracers. A quick creature has haste. Whenever an ability of a quick creature is activated, if it isn't a mana ability, you can pay 1. If you do, copy that ability and choose new targets for the copy. Ooh, okay, well this is fun, right? So with Quintorius, we could actually double up on the number of cards we exile on our turn, and then double up on the amount of cards we could cast for free. So that's pretty cool. That's going to work pretty well. Mage Right Stone, untapping Quintorius to be able to do it again. Same thing with Patriarch Seal. Same thing with Thousand Year Elector. This is going to allow us to maybe store up some cards with Quintorius for us to cast, and then at a later turn tap him a couple times to play those things from exile. I really like this strategy. I think this is going to end up being really beneficial, because you're going to be able to get a couple really good things in exile, wait for the right time, and then get them all out, and Staff the Storyteller can draw you a card when you make tokens. This is great for a deck like this, because we're just going to be making a ton of spirit tokens, which means we're going to end up drawing so much. Getting up into the spells, I love Andrew, because Andrew always does a great job at his spells being maybe not as flashy as what I would pick, but he always does a great job at just having them punch hard. Normally he does a great job at playing the things that fit the deck really well thematically and functionally, whereas I tend to be the deck builder that just tends to go for, just flashy, or what works the best, or the absolute best card in the slot, whereas Andrew always tends to find a way to make his spell base is just perfect, make them all work the way they're supposed to, even if they're not the most flashy or the staple thing for that. So we see a Braid, which is a great card in a deck like this, because we have the ways to augment that damage, but it also goes after an artifact. So this card's great because it could take out a small creature or hit an artifact. Big score for some draw. Boros Charm can give us indestructibility or double strike if that comes into play. Delayed Blast Fireball is a great card for Quintorius, because we could play it out of exile. We get 5 damage instead of 2. So I love a card like Delayed Blast Fireball. We can also foretell it out of exile and get the benefit that way as well. Heartwarming Redemption, discarding all our cards, drawing that many +1 and gaining life. You go to the number of cards in your hand. This is great because if we only have a couple of cards left and we'd like to put them in the graveyard to exile with Quintorius, well, now we're loading up our graveyard and getting it ready. But we see the Lorehold command. I'm happy. Put some more Lorehold cards in here. We get to choose 2, make a token. Here's you get +1/+0, indestructible and haste until end of turn, deals 3 damage to any target, and target player gains 3 life, or sack a permanent, then draw 2 cards. I like this. We have a great range of choices. We get the token if we want it. We get the buff if we want it. I love that this card both works thematically, because of course we see the Lorehold on here, and I love the turret, the machine guns made out of scrolls. I just think it's absolutely fantastic. But I love the Lorehold flavor. I'm glad we're getting so much of it in a deck like this. Release to Memory. Exile target opponent's graveyard. Even for each creature card exile, you get a spirit. So this makes sense. Go after that opponent who has a lot of creatures in their graveyard. Exile the entire thing. Get a bunch of spirits that we can use for our abilities. Plowshares for little removal. Thrill a possibility for some draw. And then Weird Terror, one of my favorite Boros removal cards. For 3 mana, we can hit both an artifact and an enchantment, or for just one side, we can pick. This is a great card, and I absolutely love it because I think it's one of the best. It's one of the best, modal cards that exist with these 2 cards on one that you can kind of fuse together, because it's a great card in the beginning of the game because it's available early if you have it in your opening hand, and both those sides are activatable pretty quickly, and of course both are instants, so they can stop your opponent when you need to stop your opponent. Getting up into the Sorceries, Blasphemous Act, great mass board wipe. Cathartic Reunion, pitching 2 cards and drawing 3. Again, this fits the strategy of pitch a couple cards that we want to use with Quintorius, draw some extra cards into our hand. Dance with Calamity is a card that Andrew was over the moon about, and I'm happy to see him finally get to play it, and hopefully he gets to play it against me soon. Shuffle your library as many times as you choose. You may exile the top card of your library. The total mana value of the cards exiled this way is 13 or less. You may cast any number of spells among them without paying their mana cost. This fits into the Passion Archaeologist thing. But for 8 mana, we could potentially get 10, 12, 13 CMC worth of spells, get them all down. This, of course, does work with our Planeswalkers as well that we're playing up top. So I like Dance with Calamity. There's a little bit of risk, but I think if you know your deck well and you kind of see where your where your mana values are lining up over the curve, it can be pretty easy to turn this 8 mana into 12 or 13 and just get a lot of value. Faithless Looting for the draw, again, being able to pitch to and using Quintorius to exile those. Farewell, one of the single best board wipes in the game. Man, Farewell is a board wipe you do not want to see your opponents play, but you are happy to play against them. Farewell is a very tough board wipe to play around. Unless you're using Clever Concealment or Teferi's Protection, Farewell just tends to hurt a lot of people, and it's great for a deck like this. Illuminate History, another one of our lower hold cards. Discard any number of cards, then draw that many cards. If there are 7 or more cards in your graveyard, make a Spirit. I think this is perfect for a deck like this because we get to pitch some cards we don't want, get a Spirit, and set up Quintorius for his ability. Insurrection seems like a perfect finisher for this deck. I love it. Untap all creatures and gain control of all of them until end of turn. They gain haste. 8 mana, get every creature on the battlefield and swing. I love Insurrection. It seems like a perfect top end of this deck. Jessica's Will to make some red mana, or get some cards off the top to play. Rip Apart's a great piece of removal, either taking out an artifact or enchantment or dealing 3 damage to a creature or planeswalker. I love Rip Apart. I think my only thing I wish about Rip Apart is I wish it was like 1 mana more and instant speed, and then it might be even better, but I think this is one of our best sorcery speed removal choices we could play. Stormherd, making a ton of Pegasus tokens where X is your life total. I love something like this because we have plenty of ways to give things haste with some of our spells, so I love that. Surge to Victory feels perfect in this deck. We're going to have a bunch of spirits, and we can give them a quick boost with Surge to Victory, or we can exile this with Quintorius and play it later. So I really like this. This is a great card, and this makes things like Blasphemous Act and Stormherd great things to put in the graveyard, because then we can turn them into a big boost of attack when we need to get after our opponent. Thrilling Discovery, probably my favorite Quintorius card as far as art goes. Him swinging through the caves, gain 2 life. You may discard 2 cards. If you do, draw 3 cards. So here we go. This is like a Faithful Mending plus, right? We get to discard 2, draw 3, gain 2 life. This is everything Quintorius wants to do in his ability. Vandal Blast can get rid of all the artifacts that you don't own and just hurt all your opponents along the process, or get rid of one really pesky one you don't want. And then Vanquish the Horde, one of my favorite board wipes that's been released in the last year or so. Getting cheaper for each card each creature on the battlefield just destroys all creatures. All right, getting up into the creatures, and I see a lot of red-white creatures, gold creatures here, and it makes me really happy. Let's get into them. Combustible Gear Hulk. On Ares battlefield, target opponent may have you draw 3 cards. If that player doesn't, you mill 3 cards, and then it deals damage equal to the total mana value of those cards. That's a great ability. You either get the 3 free cards or you mill 3 cards, and hopefully we have enough of these high CMC cards in our deck that we can just hit somebody for some good damage. Dark Skull Cavalry, when there's the battlefield under control, you gain 2 life, and then we can make some tokens for mana. This is great. It's also a high CMC spell, so for some of these other abilities we have, we can use that to our advantage. Drug Skull Reinforcements. Other spirits have melee, and then prevent all non-combat damage that we dealt to spirits control. This is great. It's going to protect those spirit tokens, and it's going to make them hit harder. This is the kind of stuff that I think this deck is going to shine with. We're going to have all these Quintorius things that we can do in the background, but then we have these cards that are just going to help us hit hard. Hofri Ghostforge. Here he is. Here's the guy I was hoping would be in here. Dwarf Cleric. Spirits you control get +1/+1, have trample and haste. Banger. That's great. That's going to help us so much to deal with the combat side of this deck if we can't just completely metagame the Quintorius side of the deck, and we can't complete that going. Stuff like this could help us get the combat side of this deck going and help us finish. Whenever non-token creature you control dies, exile it. If you do create a token that's a copy of that creature, except it's a spirit in addition to its other types, and has when this creature leaves the battlefield, return that exiled card to your graveyard. This fits this deck so well because what you could do is put a creature out there. If it dies, you could exile, get the copy, and then when the copy dies, put it back in your graveyard, and then use that to kind of fund Quintorius's little fun. So I like this. This card not only fits thematically, right, being the one of the professors of the Lordhold College, but fits exactly what we're trying to do perfectly. Layla the Blade Reforged, when it attacks, exile the top card, and you could play it, and whenever you exile one or more cards from a library and or your graveyard, put a counter on it. Well, we're trying to do that with Quintorius, so Lelia is just going to get bigger, and it's one of those creatures that's going to grow with the amount of things that we're doing with our Quintorius plan. Lorehold Apprentice. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, tone of turn, spirit creatures you control gain. This creature deals 1 damage to each opponent. This is a sneaky way to end the game with how many spirits we have going. If we have a big old board of spirits, we have to just cast 1 spell, which Quintorius could do on its ability. And if we have 10 or 12 spirits, I mean, this could potentially knock somebody out of nowhere. I love a card like this. It's an uncommon, something most people would probably look past. But in a deck like this, it's so well tuned for these spirits. I think this is probably Andrew's sneaky choice, a way to just potentially probably end a game out of nowhere or knock somebody out that's not expecting it. We see Mila and Luca. Mila on the front side of an opponent attacks one more planeswalker you controls, put a loyalty count on each planeswalker you control. When a permanent you control becomes a target of a spell or an ability opponent controls, you can draw a card. And that can be cast as Luca, Wayward Bonder, on the backside. Lets you discard and then draw. If a creature was discarded this way, we draw 2. Turn target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. It gains haste, exile at the beginning of the next end step. And then the -7, you get an emblem with whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control. It deals damage equal to its power to any target. That emblem could be pretty darn hard to deal with, especially with how many spirits we're going to have entering the battlefield. But I like this. The front side is good. It protects all of our planeswalkers that we're going up here and draws us cards. The back side gives us good value. So I liked it. And I think this Mila and Luca is a card that doesn't see a ton of play outside of it being your commander. So I'm glad that it sees some play in this one. Milliken. Put the copyright library in your graveyard, add colorless to your mana pool. Well, this is good because we have a ton of ways to get cards back from the graveyard. We have a ton of ways to exile those cards with Quintorius, right? I like this. This is getting us in there. Mondrak, perfect. We have the Anointed Procession. We have Mondrak. I love it. We're going to double up those spirits. We're going to get a ton of them. I think it's great. Neali seems near perfect. Andrew, love this choice. Tagging creatures you control have double strike. That's going to make our 1/1 spirits in the air really 2/2s, or if they're buffed at all, it's going to make them even harder. And then for one or more tokens you control attack, exile the top card, and during any turn you attack with a token, you may play that card. So what I like about that ability is it allows us to do it any turn as opposed to just that turn. So I love that. And of course, we see the other Quintorius here. Spirit you control got +1/+0. And whenever one or more cards leave your graveyard, you get a spirit token. So with both of them out, exiling a card to a Quintorius would net us 2 spirits instead of 1. So I like that. They work together really well. Stormcloud Artist feels great. Getting us treasures. We're already probably going to have some artifacts, so it's going to get big and allow us to push that forward. Urabrask seems great. Deals some damage to our opponents, and then you can flip it over and get a lot of fun things on the backside. Love a card like Urabrask for this deck since we're trying to play these spells anyway, and that damage can stack up. And then we have the big daddy, Philomagus Lorehold, the leader of the founder of Lorehold College. Whenever it attacks, look at the top 7. Cast an instant or sorcery without paying its mana cost, as long as it's his power or less, and then put the rest on the bottom. It's a big dragon. I think this is a great thing to try to pitch to Quintorius and get it back without having to pay it, and then you're going to start just chewing through your deck, getting things you want. It only casts instant or sorceries, but we have a lot of great instant sorceries we care about, so I like that choice for sure. And last up, 9 Planeswalkers, and I love it because this is a great mix. Some really fun Planeswalkers. Ajani Goldmane, 4 mana. Just the +1 just gain 2 life. The -1 put a counter on each creature you control. Those creatures gain vigilance in a turn. Well, here's a great way to just get a counter on all of our spirits and hit in for damage. And then -6 put a white avatar creature token onto the battlefield. It has this creature's power and toughness are equal to your life total. Well, that's great because then that's tough to deal with. But I really like that -1. Taking all these spirits we already have, putting a counter on all of them, making them better in combat. I love that most of Ajani's cards have some way to take our wide border creatures and make them even better. Next up, we have a Ajani Inspiring Leader. Gain 2 life, put 2 counters on up to 1 target creature. Exile target creature, its controller gains 2 life, so a little bit of removal. And then the -10 creatures you control gain flying and death touch until end of death touch, double strike until end turn. Okay, so we have something to work towards. We +2 every time, so it just takes us 3 turns to get up to it of +2s. And then we get to the -10, flying and double strike. Works so well for all of our spirits and all of the other creatures we have. Chandra Blaze, discard a card. If a red card is discarded this way, it deals 4 damage to target creature player. Well, this fits our Quintorius game plan where we want to get things into the graveyard. Each player discards their hand and then draws 3 cards. Well, that's pretty good. That could hurt our opponents and help us, right? Because they were going to be cards we want to get in our graveyard anyway. And then the -7, cast a number of red instant or sorcery cards from your graveyard without paying their mana cost. Jeez, that could be tough depending on what we have sitting there. And that could potentially hurt our opponents a lot. I like that. It's an interesting Chandra. Of course, we see the new one, Chandra's Hope Speaking, one of my favorite new Planeswalkers we've had in the last little bit. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, you may copy it and choose targets for the copy. That happens only once per turn. This is going to be great because we have so many value sorceries we want to get. I mean, you get this down and play something like Surge to Victory, and we might just end the game on the spot, depending on how many creatures our opponents can have that can block these spirits, especially if a lot of our spirits are big or they have trample or they're in the air. +2 gives you 2 mana. +1 exiles the top 5, and then the next turn you can cast an instant or sorcery from among those cards, and then the -X can just deal a ton of damage. We see a couple of Elspeths. Elspeth Resurgent. The +1 gives a creature a counter, and your choice of flying, first strike, lifelink, or vigilance. It's great for either Quintorius or some of our other creatures, buffing them up. -3, look at the top 7. You may put a permanent from mana value 3 or less onto the battlefield and the rest on the bottom. That's great. Get some things out, get some things moving, and that -7 just makes you a bunch of tokens. Elspeth Sun's Champion, of course, one of the most popular white planeswalkers of all time. 3 tokens on the +1, destroy all creatures of power 4 or greater on the -3, and then the -7, just flat +2/+2 and flying for all your creatures. Again, Andrew's doing a great job at picking planeswalkers that give you a ton of value, even if you need to work for them, because we're going to try to cheat them out. Jaya Ballard, 3 red mana. You can use it to only cast instant or sorceries. +1 lets you discard up to 3 cards and then draw that many cards. That feels like a great way to get some of those things that we want in our graveyard for Quintorius. And then the -8, you get an emblem with you may cast instant sorceries from your graveyard. If a card would be cast this way, exile instead. Well, this is even better because instead of having to exile them with Quintorius, if we can work up to that, we're basically just going to get them for free that way with that. With the -8, if we can. Friends, it feels only right for me to pop a nosebleed with 2 cards left, but let's do it. Let's get it done with. Nahiri the Harbinger, 2 red-white for a 4-mana planeswalker. +2 lets you discard a card if you do a draw a card. Great. Fill that graveyard up. -2, exile target enchantment, tapped artifact, or tapped creature. That's great for some removal. And the -8, Social Library for an artifact or creature card. Put it on the battlefield and shuffle your library. It gains haste. Return it to your hand at the beginning of the next end step. I like that caveat at the end, getting it back to your hand, because I think that's great, because then we can get that value that turn and then pop it back to our hand and get the value. Again, the Eternal Wanderer, probably one of my favorite newer planeswalkers in white. No more than 1 creature can attack it. You exile up to 1 target artifact or creature, return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of that player's next end step. This can either work for us or for our opponents, moving something our opponent needs that's in our way, or bouncing our own thing. I love that. The 0 just makes this token, and then -4 is one of the sneakiest board wipes, and I love this one. -4 for each player. Choose a creature that player controls, or choose a creature that player controls. Each player sacrifices the rest. This gets around Indestructible. This gets around a lot of things, and I love it. Thank you guys for watching. I'm sorry. Hopefully there's not too much blood in my nose for this one. It just feels only right that of all the recording I'm doing today, this is the video I pop a nosebleed at the end of. Thank you guys so much for watching. Deck list is in the description. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Andrew does read all the comments on his videos. Let me know what you think of his list. Like the video if you like the video. Subscribe if you want to see some more deck building content, and I will catch you guys next time.